She was sitting on the cold floor when the knock came from nowhere, not on the door, but from inside her chest, sharp and unexpected. The apartment smelled like cardboard and fresh paint, unfamiliar and thin. Outside, laughter floated through the hallway, muffled but alive. Christmas had arrived, and it had not asked for permission. The boxes around her were still sealed, like parts of a life unopened. She had planned to unpack slowly, but tonight her hands refused. The floor pressed against her legs, grounding her in this exact moment. Somewhere nearby, a television played a holiday movie she would not watch. She stayed still, listening to a world that kept going without her. This was not how she imagined 50 would feel inside her bones. She thought there would be clarity, or at least a sense of arrival. Instead, there was this strange suspension, like breathing between waves. Her phone lay silent beside her, no messages demanding her presence. For the first time, no one needed her to perform Christmas. She remembered how she used to move through holidays like a chore, cooking, smiling, mediating, smoothing edges before they could cut. There was always a role waiting for her, always an expectation. Tonight, there was only the sound of her own breathing. It felt unsettling, like stepping into a room without lights. The radiator clicked softly, trying to warm a space, still learning her name. She wrapped her arms around herself, not out of fear but habit. Old instincts whispered that she should be doing something useful. But nothing was required, and that absence felt dangerously loud. Her chest tightened around a feeling she could not yet name. She closed her eyes and let the moment stretch without fixing it. The floor was hard, but it was real, honest in its discomfort. Somewhere deep inside, something began to stir, slow and cautious. This Christmas was not decorated, not explained, not softened. It simply existed, and so did she. She did not know it yet, but this was the beginning. Not of joy, not of peace, but of truth pressing gently forward. The silence was not empty, only unfamiliar and untrained. Something inside her shifted, just enough to be noticed. And still, something was missing, waiting to be faced. The divorce had ended the same way it lived, without raised voices, no slammed doors, no dramatic words left hanging in the air, just a final signature, a nod, and a mutual exhaustion. People said that made it easier, cleaner, more mature. They did not see what silence took with it. In the absence of conflict, she had lost permission to grieve. There was no villain to blame, no explosion to point at, only years of shrinking herself until she fit the space allowed. She had learned to disappear politely, without causing concern. That kind of vanishing leaves no visible wound. She remembered the last Christmas in the old house. The lights were perfect, the table carefully arranged and full. Everyone praised how calm everything felt, how effortless she made it. She smiled, already tired before the night even began. No one noticed how far away she had drifted. What hurt now was not the marriage ending. It was realizing how long she had been gone before it did. She had mistaken endurance for love and quiet for safety. The price was paid slowly, one compromise at a time. Now the bill had arrived, and it was heavy. She pressed her palm against her chest, feeling the steady beat. This heart had carried her through decades of adaptation. It had learned to wait, to hold back, to soften desire. Tonight, it beat louder, less willing to stay unnoticed. It was asking questions she had postponed for years. Was this who she truly was, or who she became to survive? The question hovered, uncomfortable and unfinished. She had no answer, only the ache of recognition. Something inside her resisted being minimized again. That resistance felt new, fragile, but real. She leaned back against the wall, letting the thought remain open. Not everything needed a solution tonight, she told herself. Still, the silence no longer felt neutral. It carried weight, memory, and unresolved truth, and it would not let her sleep untouched. The memory of the old house arrived without warning. Wide windows, familiar corners, ornaments collected over years. It looked warm in her mind, safe and complete. Yet something in the image felt distant, almost staged, like a place she managed, but never inhabited. She had known every sound that house made at night, the creak of stairs, the hum of appliances settling. She could move through it blind, anticipating needs before they surfaced. It was a skill she perfected, being ahead of everyone else, but she was never ahead of herself. Each room held evidence of accommodation. Furniture chosen for harmony, colors agreed upon, tastes negotiated. Her preferences were always flexible, always secondary. She told herself that love required this kind of giving. No one warned her it could erase a person quietly. Selling the house felt practical, even necessary. She told friends it was time, that spaces should change with life. They nodded, impressed by her strength and composure. No one asked what she was leaving behind emotionally. She did not know how to explain it anyway. The truth was harder than nostalgia. That house was never fully hers because she was not. She had lived there as a caretaker of balance. Her own desires learned to stay silent in the background. Now, silence had followed her into this apartment. She looked around at the bare walls surrounding her. They did not reflect a shared history or compromise. They reflected nothing yet, and that frightened her. Who was she without a shared narrative to lean on? The question pressed closer, refusing to fade. For the first time, the loss felt clarifying. Not a tragedy, but a revelation she could no longer ignore. She had not lost a home, only a role. What remained was unfamiliar, undefined, and honest. And honesty, she was learning, could feel like grief. She pulled a small artificial tree from one of the boxes. It was cheaper than anything she once would have chosen. The branches were thin, uneven, slightly stubborn. As she tried to shape them, her hands slowed. A heaviness settled behind her eyes. She thought of all the moments she postponed herself. Dreams folded neatly into someday and placed on high shelves. Classes she never took. Trips she delayed. Words she swallowed. There was always a reason to wait. A priority ahead of her. Time had quietly agreed, and then it ran out. The lights tangled as she tried to unwind them. She felt a sharp irritation, quickly followed by sadness. This frustration was not about wires or decorations. It was about the years she spent untangling everyone else's needs. Her own remained knotted and untouched. She sat back and let the lights rest where they fell. Perfection no longer seemed necessary or even possible. The tree leaned slightly to one side, imperfect and exposed. Something about it felt honest in its refusal to impress. She wondered if she could allow herself the same grace. The room dimmed as evening deepened outside the window. Car headlights passed, brief flashes of movement and life. People were going somewhere, gathering, being expected. She felt both separate from and strangely safe from that pull. For once, she did not have to show up. The thought scared her more than she expected. Without obligations, who would she become? The question lingered, unanswered and persistent. She realized she had spent years avoiding that exact uncertainty. Now it stood in front of her, unavoidable. She turned on the tree lights, uneven but glowing. They reflected softly on the walls, gentle and imperfect. Something loosened in her chest, just slightly. She was not ready to reclaim everything she lost, but she could no longer pretend it didn't matter. The tear surprised her by arriving without warning. It slid down her face slowly, with no urgency or drama. She did not rush to wipe it away or apologize for it. There was no one here to reassure or discomfort. The privacy felt almost sacred. Another tear followed, then another, heavier this time. Her body seemed to recognize a long-delayed permission. She folded forward, arms wrapped around herself instinctively. The sob that escaped her was quiet but deep. It came from years of restraint finally loosening. She cried for the woman she used to be, for the parts of herself she kept small to keep peace, for the strength she gave away without keeping any. The grief was not loud, but it was complete. It filled the room without asking permission. There was no need to explain or justify these tears. They did not threaten anyone's comfort or expectations. They simply existed, valid and uncontained. She felt something soften inside her chest. Relief, mixed with sorrow, moved through her slowly. When the crying eased, she stayed where she was. Her face felt warm, her breathing uneven but real. She did not rush to fix herself or stand up. Stillness wrapped around her like a quiet understanding. Nothing needed to be resolved tonight. She realized this was the first time she cried honestly. Not for someone else, not to be strong or reasonable, but for herself, fully and without apology. The recognition settled gently, like a truth long denied. It felt both painful and strangely empowering. As she wiped her face, the room felt different. Not transformed, but acknowledged. Something had shifted, even if she could not define it yet. This tear had marked a line she could not uncross. And beyond it, something waited, unresolved but awake. The smell came from the hallway, warm and unexpected. Someone nearby was cooking, spices drifting under her door. It reminded her of a Christmas long ago, half forgotten, a night when she almost chose something different. The memory pressed forward, asking to be seen. She had been younger then, standing in a kitchen just like this. An opportunity had hovered within reach, fragile and uncertain. She remembered feeling excited and terrified at the same time. Someone had needed her stability more than her dreams. She chose responsibility, telling herself it was temporary. That temporary decision stretched into decades. The memory carried the weight of everything that followed. She felt no anger toward her past self, only tenderness. That woman did what she believed was right at the time. Still, the cost was undeniable. The smell in the hallway faded, but the feeling stayed. Her chest tightened with a familiar ache. It was not regret exactly, but recognition. She had been standing at that crossroads for years. Only now was she looking back honestly. She whispered a quiet question into the room. When did I stop believing I could choose myself? The words felt strange but necessary in the air. No answer came, only a deeper awareness. The silence listened without judgment. She realized the memory was not there to punish her. It was there to remind her she once wanted more. That desire had not died, only gone dormant. The thought stirred something fragile but alive. Hope, careful not to demand too much. As the night deepened, she sat with that memory, not pushing it away, not drowning in it. For the first time, she let it exist beside her. It did not resolve anything, but it softened her resistance. Something inside her loosened, just enough to breathe. She woke the next morning with a heaviness in her limbs. Sleep had come and gone in fragments. Her body felt older than usual, slower, less forgiving. It was as if it carried messages her mind avoided. Fatigue settled deep in her bones. She moved carefully through the small kitchen. Every motion felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. This exhaustion was not from effort or lack of rest. It was the weight of constant adjustment over years. Her body remembered what she ignored. She leaned against the counter and closed her eyes. A quiet truth surfaced without words. Her body had been signaling for a long time. Tight shoulders, shallow breaths, endless tension. It had known this life was not enough. She had called it stress, responsibility, adulthood. She had treated discomfort like a personal failure. Now she saw it differently, with gentler eyes. Her body was not betraying her. It was asking for honesty. She placed a hand on her chest and breathed slowly. The simple act felt foreign and intimate. No one had taught her to listen this way. She had learned to override, to endure. Listening felt like a small rebellion. A sense of grief rose, quiet but persistent, not dramatic, but deeply rooted. Grief for the years her body carried her without complaint. Grief for the signals she dismissed too quickly. The emotion stayed unresolved and tender. As the morning light filled the room, she stood still. She did not rush to plan or distract herself. This awareness felt important, though uncomfortable. Her body had spoken, and she had heard it. Now she wondered what else she had ignored. She decided to cook something simple for herself, not out of obligation, but curiosity. The kitchen was quiet, free of commentary or expectations. She moved slowly, choosing ingredients without compromise. The act felt strangely personal. She chopped vegetables with careful attention. The sound of the knife against the board grounded her. She noticed textures, colors, small details she usually rushed past. There was no one waiting, no clock pressing. Time stretched gently around her movements. As the food cooked, the apartment filled with warmth. The smell was different from the hallway memory. This scent belonged to her choice, her hands. Something subtle shifted in her chest, a sense of agency, quiet but real. She sat at the small table when the food was ready. No phone, no television, no background noise. Just the plate, the chair, and her presence. She took a bite and paused. The taste felt earned, intentional. She realized how rarely she ate this way. Usually distracted, accommodating, adjusting portions and preferences. This meal asked nothing of her. It simply existed to nourish her. The realization brought a tightness to her throat. It was a small moment, easily overlooked, but something about it felt foundational, like laying the first stone of a structure. She did not name it yet or claim it fully. She only acknowledged that it mattered. When she finished, she cleaned up slowly, not rushing, not proving efficiency. The quiet remained gentle, not demanding. She felt a flicker of something new, not happiness, but possibility beginning to form. Later that afternoon, unease crept back in. Without tasks, roles, or interruptions, thoughts grew louder. She sat on the couch, staring at the blank wall. A question surfaced that made her heart race. Who am I without my functions? The roles had defined her for so long. Wife, mediator, caretaker, dependable presence. They filled her days with purpose and structure. Without them, she felt strangely unanchored. The emptiness frightened her. She feared there might be nothing underneath, that she had given so much away there was nothing left. The idea pressed heavily against her chest. She wrapped her arms around herself again. Old instincts reached for comfort. Her mind searched for labels, explanations, identities. Nothing fit easily anymore. Every definition felt incomplete or outdated. She realized she had never explored herself freely, always in relation, never in isolation. Tears threatened again, but this time she resisted. She did not want to fall back into grief. Instead, she breathed and let the fear exist. It did not consume her, only unsettled her. She stayed present, despite the discomfort. The fear did not offer answers. It only highlighted how much she had avoided this space. Avoidance had kept her functional, not fulfilled. Now fulfillment felt distant but imaginable. The gap between them vibrated quietly. As evening approached, she felt exhausted again. Not defeated, just deeply aware. This question would not resolve itself quickly, but she had finally allowed it to surface. And that changed something, even if she could not say how. Darkness settled softly outside the window. Christmas lights blinked from nearby buildings. Their reflection danced faintly across her walls. The apartment felt calmer than the night before. The silence had shifted in tone. She sat by the window, watching people pass below. Their lives moved forward, full of direction and noise. She felt separate, but not excluded. This distance felt intentional, almost protective. For once, she was not performing connection. The quiet wrapped around her differently now. It no longer pressed or accused. It felt like open ground, undefined and waiting. She could sense room to move, to choose. The space felt fragile but inviting. She thought about the day's small moments, the memory, the fatigue, the meal, the fear. Each one had revealed something honest. None of them demanded immediate action. They simply asked to be acknowledged. A calm settled in her chest, unfamiliar but welcome. Not peace, not certainty, just the absence of urgency. She realized she did not need answers tonight. She only needed to stay present. She turned off the lights and let the glow remain. The uneven tree lights blinked softly. They were imperfect, but steady. Something about them mirrored her state, still learning how to stand, but standing. As she prepared for bed, a thought lingered. This silence was no longer punishment. It was space she had never allowed herself before. What she might build here was still unknown. And that unknown no longer felt like a threat. She had waited years for something that never arrived. An apology, an acknowledgement, a recognition of her quiet sacrifices. She told herself that one day someone would finally see her. That waiting had shaped her patience and her silence. Now it revealed its cost. Sitting alone, she realized how much power she had given away. She had placed her healing in the hands of others, as if her peace required their permission. The realization was sharp, but oddly clarifying. No one was coming to complete the story for her. She thought of all the moments she swallowed disappointment, all the times she said it's fine when it wasn't. Forgiveness had always been something she offered outward. She rarely turned it inward. That imbalance suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Her chest tightened as she spoke softly into the room. I did the best I could with what I knew then. The words trembled but did not break. They landed gently, without argument or resistance. Her body responded before her mind could analyze. Something loosened, slow and deliberate. Not relief, not joy, but release. The kind that comes when a burden is finally set down. She realized forgiveness was never meant to be requested. It was meant to be claimed. She did not rewrite the past or excuse the pain. She simply stopped asking it to define her worth. That shift felt monumental in its quietness. No witnesses, no ceremony. Just an internal boundary finally drawn. As she breathed, the room felt subtly different. Nothing external had changed at all. Yet something fundamental had moved inside her. She was no longer waiting to be chosen. And that realization stayed with her, unresolved but powerful. She spoke out loud again, testing the sound of her own voice. It filled the apartment more than she expected. There was no one to interrupt or correct her, no one to soften the truth, for the honesty felt raw but necessary. She talked about exhaustion she never admitted, about resentment she felt ashamed to name, about dreams she buried because they felt inconvenient. The words flowed unevenly, without structure, but they were finally hers. Her voice did not accuse or collapse. It carried curiosity, even compassion. She listened as much as she spoke. This was not a performance or confession. It was a reunion. She realized how rarely she had been asked what she wanted, and how rarely she asked herself honestly. Desire had always felt dangerous, destabilizing. Now it felt like information, something neutral and worth understanding. She paused, letting the quiet return naturally. The silence did not rush to fill the space. It waited, patient and receptive. She understood she could speak again when ready. There was no urgency anymore. This dialogue did not end with answers. It ended with permission. Permission to wonder without resolving. Permission to be unfinished at 50. The thought brought unexpected comfort. As she stood, she felt taller somehow. Not physically, but internally aligned. She had heard herself clearly for the first time. That clarity did not demand action yet. It simply asked to be honored. The decision arrived quietly, without ceremony. No vows, no declarations, no dramatic shift, just a calm internal agreement. She would no longer abandon herself. Not again, not gradually, not politely. This choice did not map out a future. It did not promise happiness or certainty. It promised presence. She would notice when she was shrinking, and she would stop. She understood this would not be easy. Old habits were deeply trained. Accommodation had once kept her safe, but safety without authenticity now felt unbearable. That awareness marked a point of no return. She did not feel brave in a cinematic sense. She felt steady, grounded, quietly resolved. This was not about reinvention. It was about reclamation, about returning to something essential. She looked around the apartment again, still small, still unfamiliar, but it no longer felt temporary or accidental. It felt like a starting point, a place where her needs could exist openly. The decision settled deeper as the night passed. It did not waver or demand validation. It simply stayed, a silent promise she intended to keep, one she would revisit many times. As she prepared for bed, she felt a strange calm, not because everything was solved, but because something fundamental was no longer negotiable. She belonged to herself now, and that truth followed her into sleep. Morning light filtered softly into the room. Christmas Day arrived without announcement. No rush, no expectations waiting at the door. Just light, stillness, and breath. She welcomed it quietly. She realized this day marked something important, not because of tradition or symbolism, but because of timing. This was the day she stopped surviving and began inhabiting her own life. The world outside continued as always. Families gathered, routines unfolded, noise resumed. She observed, without envy or resentment. Her path no longer needed comparison. It only needed attention. She brewed coffee slowly, intentionally, letting the aroma fill the space. Small rituals began forming naturally, not inherited, not expected, chosen. She understood now that rebirth is rarely loud. It does not arrive with clarity or applause. It begins with awareness sustained over time, with choices repeated quietly, with courage that looks like patience. Christmas would never mean the same thing again. It was no longer a performance or measurement. It was a marker. The moment she crossed inward and did not turn back. As the morning settled, she felt something new, not joy exactly, but alignment. Her inner world no longer resisted her outer life. That harmony felt earned, delicate, and real. And it stayed with her, gently unfolding. Nothing dramatic happened next. No sudden clarity, no immediate transformation. The apartment looked the same. The world remained unchanged, but she was not the same woman inside it. She understood that rebirthing is ongoing. It unfolds in choices, not moments. In noticing when to speak and when to rest. In honoring limits without guilt. In listening continuously. She no longer needed a finished version of herself. Becoming was enough. Uncertainty was no longer failure. It was space, and space meant possibility. She stepped outside later that day. The air was cold, sharp, alive. She breathed deeply, fully. Her body responded with presence. She felt here, unmistakably. This was not a story of loss anymore. It was a story of return, to herself, to honesty, to choice. The path ahead remained unwritten, and that felt right. She walked forward without rushing, without needing witnesses, each step grounded in intention, each breath reinforcing belonging. She was no longer waiting, and somewhere inside, a quiet truth settled. It was never too late, not to begin again, not to come home to yourself, not to live fully, at last.